and welcome to this review all about the fashion week which has just happened, which is of course autumn winter 2025, which always feels a little bit weird because we're just going into summer and it's sort of in a way always skipping a season. However, there are quite a few nice details which are sort of timeless, which what I now do with fashion weeks is just look at the details I like and see how I can incorporate it into my own style. Hello Suzanne, and that's after years of spending each year sort of looking at fashion week, comparing, sort of thinking about what that means for design in general and how it might influence the next collection I was working on, because quite often there are sort of themes going on at the moment. There's quite a lot of lace happening, and there's still that really oversized look, you know, it's sort of going into 80s, which I'm personally a fan of, and there's still lots of see-through, lots of organza used as outerwear and stuff, so there's quite a few nice details. Some stuff I didn't like. As always, I just nowadays ignore Balenciaga. I'm not sure I'm the only one who feels like that. But I found like quite a few nice ideas which hopefully will inspire some of you. And hello Sandra, and hello Amin, lovely to have you all. And I'm going to ask some questions of you as well throughout. So let's have a look at some of the nice stuff. I always like spotting nice vintage details, and that's actually go quite glamorous. We like a bit of glamour. So Ungaro, this is like a classic drafting style, which pop up all the time. So I'm going to have a look at that in a second, and I'm just saying hello to everybody in the chat. And there was another Ungaro which was also quite nice. I'm going to have a look at them in a second. Hello Miami fashion stylist, and hello Yolanda. And Yolanda saying Balenciaga forever. Yes, classic Balenciaga. I agree with you. I don't know how the rest of the chat feels about contemporary Balenciaga versus classic Balenciaga. I had quite an open mind with the new Balenciaga, but it's just become a little bit repetitive. It's basically, they all look very unhappy, and it's always the sort of same 80s shape. And we do a bit of this deconstruction. We try to shoehorn in some classic Balenciaga line, and it's just, for me, it has none of the beauty of classic Balenciaga I love. And I'm actually, later on, I'm going to talk a little bit about Givenchy, because I wasn't a fan of the newest collection either. And Yolanda saying Cristobal Balenciaga. Yes, classic Balenciaga. I think you can probably all agree a classic Balenciaga is still one of the best. So let's have a look at this beautiful Ungaro. And the collection was quite muted, but there were two really nice vintage inspired styles I really liked. One was this dress, which has sort of a cape over body on top of quite a nice simple fitted dress. And the second one was this, which for me that's quite 1940s Hollywood. There's a famous one by, is it Adrian, the American movie costume designer, who has that, and it's in two colors, in black and white. And if any of you watched the recent Agatha Christie Towards Zero, one of the characters again is wearing that sort of inspired design, but it's a really clever way and really straightforward of just creating a little bit of extra drama. And of course here it's done in a really glamorous bias cut evening dress, but that sort of detail can be used for tops. You know, you can add it with sleeves as well, so it can be like a collar and a sleeve. It looks really nice in jerseys as well. So let's have a look at how it actually looks like as a detail. Here we go. And this whole so this is from Ungaro, which I can't spell. Autumn 25. That whole collection was actually really nice, so that's worth coming for. to looking at. But what it basically is, it's either it can be a normal collar at the back, or it can be a halter neck, which makes it a really versatile style. And then all we have is our bodice with a sort of really nice raglan line. And here we've done it as a sort of slinky dress. And it needs a center front seam. So it's like that. And then all you do is you basically convert what would be your bustard. And if this is a top, you can also convert your waist studs. This is a dress, so you can't convert your waist studs. But you basically just convert or pivot all that shaping into volume up here. And then all you do is you stitch it onto here, wherever you want your keyhole to be. And then one layer, one side just goes underneath, and the other side goes on top of you. And that's all that is. And I've seen lots of versions where, for example, you have one side in this color, and then the waistband, the neckband is the other color, and then it sort of goes over. And it can be done with a waist where it goes over, and sometimes they sort of combine it with a little bit of a knot there as well. But all it is a little bit of dart manipulation and changing dart into volume, which is one of the classics. And when I'm going to zoom into this dress for a second. I want to see, because it is oh yeah, I wasn't sure if this was a seam, but it's not. I think that I would cut it on a, it looked like glamorous on a bias, but if this was a bias, it means your whole front here would be cut, your front seam would be stitched on the bias, which would be really horrible, which is why if you have a bias dress, really basic bias dress, we try to avoid seams like that, because if you ever stitch silk on a bias, it sort of puckers, it goes like this. So quite often what we have, and what of course Lionette did beautifully, is that as bias style, we have the seams on the straight of grain, so they end up looking diagonal to our garment, which means the seams are really stable, but the garment will be slinky. So I think this might be actually cut on the straight of grain, but beautiful, very easy to incorporate into your own style. And then of course the back you can have as a halter neck, or you could have the back as a sort of stand collar and then have the dress like that. Bad drawing. Or if it's a halter neck, you would have a nice curved line as well. They both work and both really nice. But that's a really nice detail to try out. And of course, if you wanted to make a day wear, all you do is you add your sleeves on there, and you make it out of a jersey, and you make it into a top, and it's a really nice smart top. I mean, it could be a nice dress as well if you could add a waist there. I mean, you could even again play with the colors in a more maybe muted way, but you can see how there's quite a lot of sort of details you can use, and that's a style which sort of has been popping up a lot, so it's sort of always there. Yes, I'm reusing my sketchbook because I'm running out of paper. This is a really nice style. I think I have the feeling I've seen this done quite a lot, and I've seen this either on the red carpet recently, this sort of style, or maybe Princess Kate, one of those, maybe one of the royals wearing it. But it's just a really nice way of doing volume, but in a restricted way. I'm going to zoom in for a second, and then I'm going to move over to the table. And actually, I would love to know from you in the chat, have you been looking at Fashion Week, or do you sort of ignore it and focus on the classics? And if you have you had any favorites at all? Because it looks like it's got a pleat here, isn't it? But if you zoom up, it's got a nice neckline, and then it's just got this sort of layer on top. And it's basically a type of circle which has been stitched in. Okay, let's have a look at it properly. This Ungaro, again from Autumn Winter 2025, is a really clever style because it's so simple. What we have is a really nice roll collar, which is basically a strip of fabric. And all these sort of classic styles, once you've learned them, you can do lots of different designs with them. And of course, we're all in the pattern cutting school if you are interested. And then there are some really nice armholes happening quite a lot this autumn. So this is a really nicely curved armhole. And then what we have basically is a bodice underneath, which is probably normally fitted, so it might have some seams or something there. And then we've got a skirt with a nice amount of volume. So properly, maybe a half circle or something. And I think it might be all cut out of one piece. I imagine the back probably has some little buttons to get in and out at the back. And then it looks exactly the same. And I might even have it might have a zip hidden underneath here as well, or a side seam zip. I'm going to do a zip here and talk in a second how you'd actually get in and out of it. And then on top of that, what you have is basically properly a circle which has been cut like this. So the hole in the circle has been cut off to one side, and then this would be your center front and this would be your center back. And what it ends up being, so that's your hole on the neckline, and then you get all this nice volume. And then that they've done, for example, from here to here, probably a bit less, they've gathered that in. So you got this sort of volume here, and then from there on it sort of goes down, and you got this really nice volume. So it's a really nice way of creating volume very, very easily. And you would literally cut your dress, make your dress underlay. Then you would cut the center front, would cut the circle, so that's the length you want, which is this one, of course, and maybe a little bit extra because you want to stitch it in. And then your center back, again, you decide how long you want that, plus of course how much you need for your neck, and that works out how big your circle is. So you add them all together, and that's your diameter. And then you just, on your trowel, you literally can pin this into your waist seam, and the waist seam might be slightly curved actually, looking at it again, which is going to help this putting it in. And you sort of stitch it not to the armhole, but probably to where the princess seam is. If you had a princess seam, that's where I would sort of stitch it to. So it looks like it's attached, but it doesn't. If you start going to the side seam, it's going to get too tight and it's sort of restrict your movement. And then at the back, again, I think it's stitched into here, it flows down. And then to get in and out, I wonder whether they've done a keyhole opening like this. So we could have a keyhole opening like that. because you have to get in or out. Alternatively, it could just be stitched to the button stand there, which I want this to be a really pretty button stand. Of course, it could be something else, but I mentioned sort of little self-covered buttons or matching buttons there. And it might be stitched to it as well, in which case you probably have a side seam zip. So you could have two options, because if you have if you have a slit there and then a keel going a bit lower and then the zip hidden, then of course the zip would go down here as well. You could step into it. If you just have a keel here and then a side seam, you have to put it over your hat. And quite often with evening wear, they tend to make it that you can step in and out to make it, you know, makeup proof and all these sort of things. But again, you can see it's a simple idea and it looks really glamorous. And I never knew about that sort of thing, that with evening wear you're supposed to step in, until I worked for a Iranian company who made really glamorous evening wear. And she literally said, you can't have clothes you have to put over your hat, because if you have just done your hair and makeup, which you can see I haven't, but if you had it all professionally done, you have to be able to step so the clothes don't get ruined. So everything we made always had to be, if it was for evening, it has to be, you have to be able to step in, which I didn't know, but then I'm probably not the clientele for that. Maybe some of you already knew it. Okay, let's have a look at a few more. Let's delete that. What did you think of these two I've had so far? I'm going to see what you say in the chat. And then I'm going to show you a few designs maybe. There are a few really pretty ones. But surprisingly, a lot of stuff I didn't like at all. So I'm going to show you a few pretty stuff first to make you all happy. Hopefully have a bit of fun. I'm going to show you one. Actually, I'm going to show you one thing which I really liked. Was with Schiaparelli coat, and this is a close-up, but I really liked this vintage detail. And I think I've done something a while ago, I think with you, where we looked at twisted scarf coats. I'm pretty sure of it. I'm going to actually have a quick look. It was like 4 styles, and we looked at exactly these sort of styles, and it's a very sort of, I think, 30s, 40s look. I'm always like this, my decades, they sort of seem to blend from one and the other. But I remember looking at coats like that because I love that idea. It's sort of very glamorous, where the sort of neckline or collar becomes like a scarf. I love that idea. And I can't see it because there's so many videos. And Sandra said, I like the circle making with sheer sleeve, but that's about it. I can't see myself wearing any of the other style lines. Yeah, but it's been it's a weird, I've heard quite a few sort of critics saying it. It's like, it's weird. A lot of the stuff on the catwalk isn't very, this sort of sounds a bit like, it's probably not what we're aiming for, but it's not very pretty. It's sort of not stuff you want to wear. And normally with the catwalks, you can, you know, you see lots of stuff where you think, oh yeah, I can see that sort of translating down and being toned down a bit. And at the moment, a lot of it, and the Balenciaga collection is a perfect example, I don't want to wear any of that. And I can't see how that's, like, I can't see how it translates into the high street. But I wouldn't want to buy it, let's say that. And it's weird because I was walking down our high street this morning, and a lot of the fashion lines, they're going quite vintage again. There's some beautiful, just classic trench coats. There are some actually really nice, trousers. I wanted to try them on, but because I never had any luck in the last 10 years with high street trousers. They fit awfully. So they look like really high-waisted denim with a sort of straight like flare, and they had like red embroidery and glass blouses to go with. I think it was River Island, and some really nice dresses. I was thinking, oh, I could actually imagine wearing it. And what I see in the catalogue at the moment, I can't see translating down. So it's it's always interesting. But what I loved about this collar, it's just really cleverly done, and it's really simple. So let's have a look at it. So this is a really beautiful Schiaparelli for autumn winter detail. So we're going a bit ahead as always, but it's a really clever sort of detail you can add to a jacket, to a coat, and it adds that glamour and that sort of scarf detail, but it stays the shape it should be. So if we have a look at it in a little bit more detail, it's a nicer page. So and what it basically is, and I am a fan of sort of all the English fabrics, which is probably why I moved to England. But I love a tweed, I love a houndstooth, all the sort of wool fabric. This is a really nice one. And all it is basically, I'm not gonna do it justice, is you have your crew neckline, your normal neckline like this. You have quite a nice single button stand, and I use sort of gold buttons, which sometimes I'm not a fan of, but they work really well here. Because classically, of course, it's the English style, you do self-covered. You would do leather, maybe like a horn, but on here the gold works really well. But then all what happens is that you have I would basically do, I would cut a piece of fabric probably like this, like the sort of scarf fabric I want. Yeah, and I would actually tie it round myself and get it exactly the right length with the knot, because it's just sort of pulled through as a single knot, isn't it? I would work out it's the right height, all these sort of things. And then what you basically do is you attach it to here. So this is your center back. What is really nicely done is that this edge is leather bound, or something which looks like leather, so you could have matching leather buttons as well, which would be beautiful. And then what you do with the collar is, let's see how I can draw it. You have the collar stitched in like a really high stand collar, and then at this point it basically becomes loose, and it just looks like that, and it's loose, and then you can just knot it. So this side we've done underneath, and then inside, and the other on the outside, and then it looks like we've just lined it in a matching plain fabric. But it's a really nice quick details, and you know, you could add that to lots of different wool jackets, maybe even a brushed like a brushed cotton. And if you made it much smaller, and that's sort of been happening in summer quite a lot, is where you won't actually end up with quite a nice little detail. So you can see how by blowing up what is quite a pretty little detail, which is basically just a stand collar with extra, can become really glamorous, or vice versa. And of course, what you could do if you didn't always want to have it, so if you wanted this coat to be really wearable but you wanted to add this detail, you could actually make it detachable. So you could have it like as a crew neck collar, and then you could have either little buttons, or probably little buttons, and you could button it on if you wanted to, or have a little just made with a zip as well. That would be a nice detail as well if it was detachable. But you can see how easy it is, and it gives a lot of instant glamour. And Suzanne is saying, oh, Miss is saying it looks like a scarf. It does look like a scarf a bit. Yeah, that's what I like about it, but it sort of always stays where it should be. And if it's a scarf, I'm not sure if I'm the only one, it always likes either too tight or too big. This is sort of controlled to here, and then you only add the detail, which I quite like. And Yolanda is saying, do you remember Red Raincoat by Claire McCardle with a knotted collar? Vaguely. I remember a dress like that, Yolanda. And I definitely know I've done, it was 4 vintage styles, collars. I need to maybe search collars in my YouTube content, and if I find it, I will put it in the comments for you, because I'm pretty sure I've done something like that, a proper in-depth analysis of stuff like that. And Susanna is saying, I just finished a short woolen jacket from double-sided wool. Ooh, it sounds lovely. And the pattern was by Bella Loves. It has a collar similar to this. Oh, I have to look that up, because it'd be interesting to see what size they made that. Oh, I think I might have seen that. It's a very pretty sewing pattern, and this would be perfect in a double-sided wool. It'd be beautiful. Can you imagine all the seams finished really nice? And then of course what you can do is you just cut your collar out of one piece, and when you hand finish the you hand finish all your edges, which is a little bit of a real work of love of work, a lot of time invested anyway. So this was a really beautiful one. Let's have a look at some stuff I wasn't so keen on, which was Givency by Sarah Burton. And I do like Sarah Burton. She's been at Alexander McQueen for a long time, and you know, she's been at the helm of it. She was, I think, studio manager, and then she took over. And it's what I always like about Alexander McQueen under her. Some of it was really conceptual, out there, but she really considered the wearer. It was one of, sometimes you see labels think, oh yeah, the clothes you can see, you know, it's an amazing concept, but they then haven't considered the human body which is wearing it. If I show you an example what I liked about Sarah Burton next Alexander McQueen. Well, with Sarah Burton for Alexander McQueen, it always felt like it was very much about the woman wearing it as well. It was always basically flattering. And she has just taken over at Givency, and they've just done a recent collection, and I just didn't feel it at all. And I'm going to show you some examples. Let's have a look. So when I think of Givency, I'm probably not the only one who thinks of Audrey Hepburn, but this is like one of the sort of, this is what I love. This has been on my Pinterest for years. It's just really pretty. I'm going to zoom it down. I've always loved that pair of trousers, which is why it's on my Pinterest. But you can see it's got some sort of really over top details. Again, scarf like the coat we just looked at, and it's got like really beautiful blouses. And Givenchy did lots of really cotton blouses with really sort of out there details, but it's really feminine. You can imagine wearing all of it or part of it, maybe toning a bit down and really wearing it. And Henry Wilkinson, who you should follow on Instagram if you like old Givenchy. He collects it, and it does amazing work. He did like a comparison of old and new Givenchy, which you can see now. So he had the same image I had as well. So he's a fan of the classic Givenchy as well, and he just compared it to how this is the classic one from 1952, and then you got how it was sort of interpreted. And I wasn't, you know, you can sort of see where I've done it, but I'm just not a fan of the lines as well. And then you can see another classic Givenchy, and then you can see, yeah, they've done a back to front jacket, but it's just like the classic one is sort of variable. This is sort of, it's quite Balenciaga, so I'm not a fan of it. This again is a really beautiful garment, and you can see, yes, I use the same sort of fabric, but it's these oversized shoulders, which for me just don't say Givenchy. And what I love about this, I'm not normally a fan of these sort of puffy, pure puffy, like, you know, this is just one big puff dresses, but here it really works because the top fabric is see-through, and then the body sort of goes slightly through it. And then the new interpretation of this was just one giant puff, and it's just, again, it's a bit it's like a bit like too obvious. And again, classic Givenchy, beautiful, and you can see we got the twist again. And this I found, I think this is just sort of, you know, classic occasion evening wear, beautifully fitted, unusual lines, and then it's got that I think it's a rope and glass or sack back, where the back is basically full of volume. And when they just literally more or less copied it, they left out all the sort of interesting constructions and sort of style, you know, the sort of shaping which makes this one interesting, and we just chopped it off, and it's just like a little bit boring, which I hate to say about Givenchy. So yeah, this is sort of I wonder what you think of it. I'd love to know. So for me, Givenchy is that. It's over what will happen, you know, we all know what it does. But then a lot of the Givenchy, the ones I opened and I was looking at, they were just thinking, it doesn't work for me. It's like the one, this just, it's just a really basic mini dress with a corset, and I'm sure it's beautifully constructed, but it has like none of the elegance of the original Givenchy. So it's just a little bit disappointed. Normally at Alexander McQueen, even if they do fitted dresses, it just doesn't work. It's sorry, if they do fitted dresses, they're still like special, because this, I hate being rude, but this is a bit like, it looks quite high. It doesn't look the purest luxury dress. It's like a sort of cute mini dress you buy. I don't buy many dresses, but you buy from, you know, you buy from a high street, you pay not very much money, and it looks cute on a night out, but it's not Givenchy for me. So that was a real disappointment. And again, this has sort of been going on a lot, is these really oversized shoulders, where it just goes completely over the top. And what I find quite, it sort of started, I think, for me, I think fully, it's sort of been creeping in, because of course the references have been going through the 80s, 90s. We're now actually hitting 2000. So you can sort of see why we're suddenly bringing the shoulder. And of course Thierry Mugler sort of was relaunched a few years back, actually beautifully done. So stuff like that, it just feels a bit like it's a caricature of the 80s shoulders, and then it's also a caricature of Givenchy to a certain degree, and it does certainly look a bit like bland. It's not like exciting. It doesn't, you can't see like that being worn on the catwalk and looking beautiful on most of us, I think. So you can see, like, yes, there's like the tailoring is good, there's a nice sleeve, the bodice is fitted really nicely, but even the shoulder, it collapses, so it's sort of a bit, it's just like, I can't actually take it quite seriously. And interesting, I've just been watching Rivals, gone completely on tangent now, but Rivals is a Julie Cooper book, and they made a TV series about it, and it's all set in the 80s, and it's a fun watch, very easy to watch. But I read about an interview with a costume designer, but they actually didn't want to make the clothes to laugh at as caricature, so they sort of slightly updated them so they look attractive from today's perspective. And like all the menswear trousers are actually beautiful. I was looking at those. Oh, I want those corduroy trousers and that coat and that knit there. But even all women's wear is that 80 puffiness. There's some shoulder, but they have chosen a lot of them quite carefully, that they are sort of not looking too over top, because quite often when you sort of go back and you reinterpret it, you overblow it, because of course in real life most people wouldn't have worn this really over top, or a lot of the time not as extreme as you see in this image. So I can't see this translating into everyday fashion, and I just don't think it has the beauty of the old Givenchy. So you can see, yes, good tailoring, probably beautifully constructed, beautiful fabrics, but I just rather have something like this, or any of the dresses Audrey Hepburn wore. What do you think? I'd love to know. And I know Miss is saying it looks a bit bland. Yeah, it's just, yeah, actually, if you look at this, you can see it's actually beautiful fabric. It's like a lace fabric. But it's just all, it's pretty, like, yeah, it just all looks a bit like, yeah, it's sort of a bit bland. It's just, I'm sort of thinking, it doesn't make me excited, or, you know, or sometimes you think, yeah, it's not my style, but I can see it's beautiful. There's some stuff, you know, which are really beautiful. I'm gonna have a look through. Oh, I'm gonna actually show you one dress I really liked, which was by Erdem, and this, I'm actually not 100% sure I like the silhouette. I think I'm just zooming in, it's like a really 3D fabric, but I think this is sort of a reinterpretation where you have a classic style that sort of, you know, where it just sort of forms a grown on sleeve, it goes in and then goes out. It's a really beautiful classic silhouette, which, you know, has been used for evening wear again and again. You can do it in a silk and a cotton for day wear and a wool, and he's just updated it with the fabric, but it's a really beautiful dress. I'm going to find a piece of paper. Oh, and I'm just looking back to a chat because Suzanne made the pattern by Bella Loves, and then Susan said it was the Rupert pattern by Bella Loves. Thank you, Susan, because I just spat read it and I saw the Susan. I was thinking, oh, it's Susanna, but it's a different one. It's a Susan. So I will look it up, Rupert pattern. And Suzanne is saying, I agree, I love Hepburn. Yeah, and it's just like some of the clothes are, for example, she always quite often this, because Audrey Hepburn was so tiny, he does that drop waist and that the volume comes out. So I can admire it. I wouldn't probably design it. I wouldn't wear it because I think that's a very tricky style to pull off. But I can still see the beauty in it. I can see it's beautifully constructed. The proportions are really nice. And what Henry Wilkinson on Instagram does, he looks over details and you just see everything about the Givenchy is fantastically made. But the new one, yeah, you can see sort of some of it, like the fabrics look beautiful. Tailoring is probably great, but it's just not that flattering or beautiful. It doesn't make you gasp, does it? Or want you to be that person, I think, personally. But in most cases you want to be Audrey Hepburn in a lot of films. So let's have a look at this beautiful Erdem dress, which has lots of nice details to inspire. What I love about classic silhouettes like that Erdem has really interpreted them to the fabric, and maybe a slightly looser waist to be really contemporary, but it's a really classic sort of style where you have basically a boat neck, so it's just cut straight, and if you cut a neckline straight, it rises up, so it sort of goes slightly up, it ends up looking like that. You can see that. And then it's got a really nice dropped shoulder, and that's the sort of thing where you would, on the trial, you double check the fit is great. And then what we normally have is a fitted waist. I'm going to zoom in for a second. can't see anything because of the fabric. I think it could be just a princess line, or quite often I've seen these done with pleats, which looks really nice. I mean, it makes it look a little bit more relaxed, and you should be symmetrical, not like mine. And then what we have is just a really classic dress with quite a few sort of really deep pleats, and quite often what you can do is what you do with pleats like this. Can't quite see which direction. I think I might be opposite, might be a box pleat. But it's just a really classic way of just basically you move your bustard shaping wherever you want them, or you want to seam or stuff, and your waist shaping as well. And when this is left really sort of plain, so that's why you have to choose a fabric really wisely, because it sort of frames your face really nicely. And when all you have, like, that's your normal block, and you just have a really nice grown on sleeve, not too low. And I think they've put in a little bit of a shoulder pad, but you can do without it. And you can imagine that, you know, in silk for evening, in, you know, special like fabric like this, you can imagine having the top layer in a lace or see-through fabric, and then having maybe even a bottom layer which is just a sleeveless dress. You can have imagine lots of versions like that, and you can also imagine a day wear. And if you sort of introduce a waistband as well, that'd be maybe more day wear. You know, there's lots of versions, but it's just a really classic, beautiful silhouette. So I wanted to show you that to clean the palette after Givency. So let's look at a few more before we finish off. Oh, I want to show you quite a few nice American ones. We have a look. There are some really dreadful stuff. I'm gonna show you a few I just like, really like. So Del Pozo, with Del Pozo, I always think of lots of really embroidered stuff. Lots of like, quite often with conceptual sleeve. You know, I think has done a lot of beautiful sleeve. But the collection this year was really understated. But have a look at that. This is basically, it's of quite a vintage style, but you have that length you don't really see as much, but it's just a really nice done pair of trousers. And then it's basically like, it reminded me a little bit like a torso block. It's a fabric as well, but it's like, it's incredibly simple. It's basically like your fitted block, but it's probably really beautiful fabric. It's beautifully constructed, and then they've done the neckline a little bit. So it's with stuff that's simple, it's the little details which sort of take it from a basic block or a torso block to something really beautifully designed. And I think this is actually, it stopped me basically. It's sort of quite perfect, and they've done sort of a construction is quite nice. You got one princess seam going into the armhole, then you have what looks like a, maybe even, oh, I can't actually see properly, it might even be like an insert panel. There's sort of lots of very clever details, but the overall look is so simplistic. So if you know, quite often like the catwalks are so over top, so you would sort of walk past something like that, and on the catwalk it wouldn't probably do anything for you, but it's actually really beautiful, beautifully made. And if I go to a table for a second, I wanted to show you probably why I think it's really clever. So I'm going to draw the basic block in a different color, just to show you how how really subtle differences. So if you say you have our basic torso block, which is something like that, and then what you have is probably bust darts like that, and then you have your darts like that. So that would be your basic torso block. What they have done is they brought this slightly out. Then I think the shoulder is probably nearly identical. Then I would mention it's really beautifully fitted and just a little bit longer, which is a really unusual length. It's sort of quite vintage. You sometimes see it in sort of maybe late 50s, sort of pair of fitted trousers, and then you've got like a sort of that length above. But I think, from what I can see, it's actually quite clever. So what they've done is they've done one shaping here and one shaping here, so it's really well shaped. Now it might go all the way down, or it might be a dart. I think it's a dart. And I actually think, which I couldn't see it when I was looking at it first, I think they actually done it maybe like that, which would be incredibly, mind-bogglingly interesting. And that's where your basic torso block becomes something really special. And it's either that or it finishes halfway up. But if I zoom in for a second, can you see it looks like it could be a seam going all the way across, in which case it would be stunning. Or it could just be going halfway across. Still stunning, slightly easier to draft. So you can see stuff like that, you know, when you first look at it, it's just a white top and a white pair of trousers. But these are the little details, you know, where you just think, oh yeah, it'd be quite an experiment. But also sometimes, rather than always wanting to add lots of special details or completely changing your block, so think about just, you know, just using your quite standard seams and darts and then just changing the neckline. It's a different outfit. So I thought that was very beautiful. I also, for us vintage fans, I saw a very nice Duro Olivu, who's a London-based designer who is very good with prints. He's famous for his prints. He's been around, I think, for long. I've come across him nearly 20 years ago, so he's been around for a while. But what I loved about this is sort of vintage design reinterpreted, and you can see how it's got a really nice classic sort of what I think of a 1930s skirt with a panel and a yoke. You know, you see them all the time, but it's updated through the fabrics. And actually I'm just looking, it could be a pair of trousers as well. So I think it's got just a pleat there somewhere, or maybe some volume. But skirts like that, they have a classic I think this is it. This is a really beautiful reinterpretation of a vintage style. So it's got the classic waistband, really high-waisted, but then it sort of picks up all the details of a 1930s day-wear panel skirt. So what we have is, I think, an 8-panel skirt, but the 2 center panels are as one. And then it's got this sort of yoke here, which is sort of typical 1930s. And I always think with 1930s, they do really clever details and they do like all these seams. I always wonder, how does it look like in a real garment? And here you can see it. So what he's done is really clever. It's just, I think, again, it's like this, and it is sort of has a real vintage feel, but the fabric's updated and make it feel less. It's not pure vintage, it's contemporary design, but it has these sort of influences. I think there's actually a center front pleat, maybe even. But you can see how you can look at vintage design, and sometimes people say, "Oh, I only like contemporary stuff," but you can sort of see how you can reinterpret stuff and make it completely contemporary just by the fabric choice in this case. And yes, I'm going completely the other colorway than the original, but you can see how it's basically just a sort of yoke and cutouts, and I wonder if these are pockets as well. Like it could be patch pockets, but how that completely changes the look of what is a classic vintage panel skirt. So very easy to draw, and then you can just draw on your style lines to suit you. Okay, so that was very beautiful, I thought. You might not, but do you agree that it's quite vintage? Let's finish. Oh, I can show. I've actually, a lot of the stuff I came across was bad. I'm going to show you one really bad stuff because it just made me laugh. This is barley. Barley been around for ages. I think it's Italian Swiss, so Swiss Italian side of Switzerland. Beautiful leather goods, really high quality. It's the sort of stuff you see vintage stuff and it looks amazing after 50 years. It's always been quite equestrian, horse riding influenced, but I think a lot of leather goods companies have that heritage from horse riding and luggage quite often. But this just made me laugh because it's beautifully pattern matched. You know how we always talk about, yeah, pattern match, I'm pattern matched it. And well, I've done before where I pattern match it perfectly and look at it and think, oh, it doesn't actually work pattern match. And this is a perfect example of this. It beautifully pattern matched. It just doesn't work. It's like what it basically is, I think, is a very Viennette inspired barrel shape. But the way they've treated the check, I'm just not a fan. What do you think? You can actually see how beautifully this is made, how it sort of flows around up into the collar, it flows onto the sleeves. It's literally pattern matched perfectly throughout the whole garment. And it's just that what comes out in the skirt, it's just there's something not quite wrong. But I think it would be quite hard on that fabric if you want to pattern match everything to keep it flowing throughout, because what it basically is, if I draw it out for us, I think so, it's basically a dress which is quite beautifully fitted. It's got an interesting collar as well. I want to sort of see how it looks at the back. Sandra is saying if it stopped before the skirt, it would be beautiful. It would indeed. So you can see they've actually done probably a dart here in the where you can't see in the blue, but then they've also done a seam here, which gives you that really nice it gives you the lines, they go up a bit, and that's actually quite flattering. I quite like that when you use a fabric like that, so that's really flattering. And then of course it goes up to here. And I have to say, I appreciate that it's probably really beautifully done. But I always think if you pattern match everything around here, it can sometimes look a bit flat. So I'm not always a fan of pattern matching around there. It can look really beautiful when it's done in the vintage style, where the cut is quite feminine. And the way sort of maybe meeting at angles and stuff. But here I think it actually looks a bit flat. But then when it goes a little bit weird, and I think this is very much what Viennette called her barrel style, which is like a peplum. And when Viennette combined it with both straight styles, and she also combined it with full circle skirts. They've done it with a straight one. So what you've basically do is, rather than a normal block, which looks like that, you cut it apart from there around here, and then you basically end up with like a straight piece, and then you end up with a piece like that. Charles James has done it as well. Clover dress is a good example of that. And actually they've done it more straight, haven't they? Like this. And then, I don't actually even understand it. They must have, if you have, actually no, that's exactly what it is. It's like sort of, the fabric goes like that. And maybe because of how she's working, it actually looks distorted, like it comes up. So I literally just said, oh yeah, we have to follow this up. We have to follow this up, so we have it all pattern matched carefully. But because this is a curve, it then ends up looking like this. So you have that weird distortion there. And it would have been really beautiful if I then, for example, instead of doing a single one, if I'd done it in, you know, if I'd done it in several panels, you could have had a skirt which sort of goes like that, and then actually becomes really feminine and really interesting. And actually Claire McArdle did some beautiful stuff with tartans. But this is just like, you can see the ideas there. The skill and craftsmanship is there, but it's just like, what happened? Nobody look at, or do I actually think it should be like that? In which case, I apologize. I appreciate your vision, even if I wouldn't want it. But it's just sort of which is one of the reasons I love looking at vintage clothes, because you got hundreds of years, but even the last 100 years, you can pick the best ones, and you can disregard all the stuff where it didn't quite turn out, which you know nobody's going to probably quote this in 100 years as a beautiful design. So yeah, let's finish off with some beautiful stuff. I always quite like New York Fashion Week because it's very wearable, and I will show you some really nice Carolina Herrera style. So we've got a beautiful dress, and the reason on the pattern cutting school at the moment, Suzanne will know, we are doing princess lines, so some tutorials will go up all about the classic princess line with sort of, you know, torso block shaping, different ideas. And what I really liked about this collection, it had just some really classically pretty dresses. And I went to a fashion school where pretty dresses wasn't a compliment, so I love a pretty dress because, yeah. So you can see this is just a, and here actually the print is used beautifully, because this is a really oversized print, and they've done a classic princess line, and that actually breaks up the print beautifully, because otherwise it probably, because it's such a big print, it could be a little bit flat, and by having these princess lines, it breaks it up really nice. And you can actually see it has a lot of things in common with the last Bali we saw, but it's just a really beautiful classic style. Again, I think we've got 6-panel skirt as well, and we've got a roll neck, we've got nice sort of slightly shirty sleeves, but you can see we had roll neck before, so we've had big prints before. That's what I love about fashion, little changes and it looks completely different. And then this one, the blue one, is very clever, and this is actually really hard to do well. Sorry, pulling this wrong picture. Can you see this one has got lots of parallel lines which look completely straight, and of course when you draw on your lines, it's actually really hard to keep them completely parallel. And if you just had one princess line going completely straight, that quite often is less flattering than a princess line which goes slightly towards the center front like this one does. So having it parallel works really well when you have lots of them, so it's like a corset. Let's have a look at the table and finish off. So let's go from very odd pattern matching to something really beautiful. So this is just a little bit like with the Pozo, is classic sort of just a band collar, classic armholes. I will imagine because we have a belt, we have a waist seam, which makes fitting much easier. And if this is the first video you watch, the reason I say if you have a belt, you have a seam, it's one of the things, for one of the companies I worked for, our rule was you weren't allowed to have an exposed seam. So you always either had to have a waistband, be it a lot of sort of grow grain and rickrack, because it was quite sort of vintage inspired, or you have a belt, and that finishes the seam. So it sort of turns it from a normal dress to something which looks really finished. And if you look at vintage styles, they do it quite often. It's just like, I think it's quite a vintage sort of way of doing it, where you don't just have a single seam on your waist. You always either have a waistband or you top it up with something. But you can see how these are just beautiful style lines, so they have to be really considered. And you probably have them meeting right here, and I don't think they're fully parallel, they're very slightly angled. And if you use your dart position, that is always quite a good start. But you can see that it's just a really nice way of breaking up a printed garment. And then we've got, again, beautifully fitted sleeves. We've got a cuffed sleeve at the end with a bit of volume. And then the back probably again has buttons there as before. And then you just probably have an invisible zip. Like this. And then the back you could do exactly the same again with a princess line like this. But it's just a really classic design which works really well. So, you know, we had lots of them where I was saying I can see, you know, the idea, but it just doesn't work. This, you know, it's a really well, again, it's a simple dress, stunning print, so the pattern cutting has been top notch to actually show off that print, so it doesn't look flat, it doesn't look heavy, it looks really nice. And the way they've placed it is really clever as well, because you, of course, you never want the placement here, you don't want it on your bum, stuff like that. So I've sort of done it slightly to the side of a hip, and then it's sort of above the bust, so it's just really well done. And let's finish off this one. So stars like that. You can see, because they've done so many lines, the skirt has lots of volume. I'm going to zoom in one more time. Yeah, you can see there's lots of volume. Beautiful. So this is a bit like a tulip style as well. This is a really clever way of adding shaping and adding volume at the same time. So what we have is what you would call princess line dress, or a classic seam dress without a waist seam. So we have quite controlled volume, and then it goes like that. And if I pull it up, so you can see it over hem, so you can see how suddenly from roughly here we get lots of volume. And the way it's achieved, what we would normally do is we would, you know, add a seam there and stuff like that. But instead, what we basically have is lots of seams. How many have we got? Lots. And they're very well done, because they actually look straight, and they probably come slightly out. And I think there's one more. this, and this is one of those designs you have to flat pattern cut, and then you have to fix it on the trowel as well, and then move it slightly so it optically looks straight. And then of course each panel has lots of volume, and it becomes really 3D from that point. So each panel actually probably looks something like this. And then, for example, that would be the center part. But when you actually put it on the bodice, it looks straight. So it's really clever pattern cutting. Of course, she has quite a straight figure, so it's easier for that as well. But it can be achieved because, of course, we have the sort of the shaping there. And then I would imagine they've only done the center part, and then you can also curve the side parts a bit more. But it's a really clever way of creating lots of dramatic volume and lots of nice style lines as well. Okay, so these were just some of the styles I actually came across a lot more. Actually, I'm going to show you one I really didn't like. This was Yves Saint Laurent, and Yves Saint Laurent hasn't been my favorite for years. I don't know what they're doing, but look at that. That's like... So we got the dropped, you know how I was saying how Givenchy used to do a drop waistline, which is really hard to pull off. So Givenchy would do a really fitted bodice, and then from around your hip bones, the volume would pop out. And that's what they've done. But they've done it with a baggy top. And then instead of the Givenchy lines, they're really considered. This is like a poof. And then they put like a round, oversized leather jacket on top. And I just thought I have to show it to you because this is sort of yeah, I don't even know, it's just not very nice. So yeah, so I had sort of lots of examples where I was just thinking, oh, this is just not very great, but I wanted to show you in nicer lines. I wanted to show you, for example, on Max Mara, lots of it was wool, so I thought we don't want to have all wool, but look at this beautiful skirt. So there's lots of, what I like about looking at the catwalk, there's little details you want when you sort of think, oh yeah, I can see how this has been updating. I can see, you also sort of see, oh yeah, I can see, you know, that fabric, I hadn't thought of it that way, and that's sort of been done everywhere. That's what I like there, and sort of seeing what's sort of coming back in the corridor, which also of course means, even like I know a lot of you have, you have your own style, you don't really follow the trends, but even you can expect what will hit the fabric shops soon, you know, because even that's influenced by trends. So if you've been looking for that specific flower print, you might be in luck finding it. Or if like lots of oversized wools are fashionable, will sort of actually be available to buy. So it's always considerations, details, buttons, all those sort of things you can look at and get inspired by. That's it for me for today. Thank you so much for joining me for this review, and I will see you again soon. Bye.